Hello, welcome everyone. This is Mihai Algiu, and this is my guest for today, Dan McLintock. Welcome, Dan. Yeah, so this is again one part of this discussions that this topic, intersection between psychotherapy and non-duality. So discussions with people that are either wise, spiritual teachers, non-dual philosophers, or wise therapists, practitioners, where we are working at the intersection between these two seemingly separated domains, like awakening, presence, the true self, and trauma, addiction, processing, psychosomatic limiting beliefs. And yeah, so I'm very happy to have Dan today. I think it's been long overdue. Most of you who are watching this perhaps have watched many talks, like 20 hours I had or more with Scott Kiloby. So for those of you who don't know, Scott Kiloby co-developed this Kiloby inquiry and this new phase of his work, the Kiloby inquiries and the new model of recovery with addiction. He co-developed this this modality with Dan, and yeah, so I should have approached him maybe a long time ago, but here we are. I'm stoked to have you, and if you can share with me a little bit, yeah, how was your path? What was happening, let's say, prior to meeting Scott, or what prompted you to meet Scott? It seemed like initially you were a client, and then you guys became friends. And yeah, what was happening? It seems like everybody who comes to Scott is dealing with some suffering. So if you can share a bit about your path and your struggles, and prior to getting there, and a little bit what happened there, and how it how it transitioned from client to friend, from co-developer, and what's happening now.
Yeah, of course, totally. Yeah, and thanks for having me too, Mihai. I appreciate it. I told you before that we started recording, I've been watching your guys' videos and wanting to talk to you about this. So yeah, what was happening before, I think for me, was like intensification of suffering, like from like about 2008, I think, to 2012 or 13. It was just like my trauma started to really become apparent to me. I was able to sort of hold it down in my 20s, my early 20s, and in high school and all this stuff, and cope with it different ways. For me, a lot of it was like masturbation, pornography, using weed and alcohol to escape, all the sort of normal things, But yeah, when I was about 25 or 26, I was in a relationship, and I started to realize I hate this person that I'm in a relationship with. I simultaneously hate them and I need them. This girl that I was dating, and I went to my mom, who my parents had both been in Al-Anon for like probably 10 years prior to that. And so they were sort of starting to come to the realization that there was like ancestral and alcoholism like coming down both sides of our family, right? So they're exploring that. And then I had this realization about, I need and hate this person that I'm dating, and that just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like that's how it should be within the relationship, And so I went to my mom and said, what is this? Like, do you have any idea? And she said, why don't you come to Al-Anon and start to like learn about what codependency is, about what alcoholism is, intergenerational trauma. And so I did, and I got pretty good at learning about it. Like learning the concepts of it and talking about it, and doing the steps even, and like supporting people, sponsoring other people, doing all this stuff. And so that was sort of my intro into spirituality was that. But really, what I later came to find out was that was just head stuff. I was starting to go, okay, I'm just learning things here. I'm just picking up concepts and ideas. You know, which now looking back, I'm like, well, that's the problem. That was my problem to begin with, was picking up concepts and beliefs and ideas and programs and piling them on. And so the suffering started to intensify. So I've been in Al-Anon for probably 8 years or so. And then I had an experience in the pool. The woman that I was dating at the time, and I was in the pool for about 15 minutes, and I had one of those, like, everything falls away. You know, everything sort of looks like a video game or something. It was just, I didn't know had no context for it, but it was just like laying in the pool, and all of a sudden there's no separation between anything. I'm going, what am I dying, or what is this? Like, what's going on?
Like in Matrix, you see the numbers and the, you know, not the building, but the code.
Yes. Yeah, all ones and zeros, just kind of like, okay. You know, and it's funny because I went back inside after that, like, sort of like that happened, the opening happened, and then it closed back up again. I went inside and I told my girlfriend at the time about it, and I was like, yeah, this just happened. She was like, okay, you know, like, great. Like, are you gonna do the dishes or whatever? And I was like, I just don't know what's going on. And so at that point, that's when Scott and Byron Katie and Fred Davis and people and Aja Shanti and people like that started to show up, you know, in the form of books and videos, and, you know, and I read Power of Now, of course, like when I was early 20s, and thought, this is so brilliant, and I could feel it when I was reading it, and it stopped the mind and all stuff, but experientially I didn't, you know, the only thing that occurred to me after that opening experience or whatever was, I was like, maybe this is part of what Eckhart was talking about, who knows, you know. So but anyways, so once that happened, it was almost like I learned enough in the head. I'd had the head part of the opening, or whatever you want to call it, and then the iceberg of trauma that had been like jammed down in my body for years since I was a kid, and started to push it down, you know, go, I'm not feeling this anymore. That started to rise up. So at that point, after that opening, I started to feel like I was going crazy. You know, it's just like working at like a Whole Foods style grocery store, and the people that was there that I was friends with, but it would just be like, you know, they'd be like, hey, Dan, I'd be like, oh. You know, it'd be like, yeah, total PTSD response, like, where are the bullets coming from? Like, friends would call it, and it'd be like, oh, I can't, you know, this type of thing. So, yeah, so that was no fun. I just like, God, what is going on? And that led me to Scott's work. He was doing the living inquiries at the time, and so I tried to start to train for the living inquiries as a facilitator at that point.
And so, just to ask you quickly here, so before going to Scott for that, you already going to Adi Ashanti or Byron Katie, or meditating, you were attending satsang, you're like serious, committed person?
I was doing Byron Katie work on my own. I was mainly doing like 12-step work, and I was listening to Aja. I was just like listening and watching Aja talk. And the thing that really pulled me in with him was, he said, look, thinking is the addiction. You know, he had some talk on that I heard on whatever, but he was addicted to your thinking. And I kept going, yeah, that's right. But I was still sort of like transitioning out of 12-step, because I also, by the way, PS, I had been in, because I had pornography addiction. That was the way that I soothed my nervous system and took care of myself, basically. And that had gotten pretty intense during that time. So
you were going to SA too?
Yes, I was in SA, for a couple of years. And that was like the programming from that, and the repression and the stuff that I started to do, because SA is basically like, you can't have sex with anybody other than your spouse. First of all, they say spouse is only a man and a woman, you know? it's just very like religious, sort of Southern, rigid, you know. So I started to repress completely because I wasn't with anybody at that time. And I was like, I can't have sex with anybody, even myself. I have to just completely go, no.
Yeah, even sobriety for a year before you engage in some relationship there, huh, in SA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With a husband.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, it just, yeah, I don't think I realized the damage that did. I mean, I had some in my childhood. I had like kind of moderately religious upbringing. So, and there was, sexual repression there and sort of like, that's bad and all that. But when I got into SA to try to deal with the porn thing, it was just like, I took on the identity of addict. I took on the identity of like, I'm a pervert. I'm sicko. Any sexual feeling I have means that I'm bad. I have to like totally push down all of that to protect other people, and I'd never like abused anyone or done anything. I was just a kid that was looking at porn and like everybody else. But so
strengthen some deficiency story as we look at it now. Strengthen some deficiency story and strengthen the repression. The 12 steps there.
Yeah, totally, both. And gave me the idea like because I remember going, identifying, going, oh, that's what I am. I'm an addict. I'm a sex addict. That's who I am at my core. That's what, and it was almost like a relief to go, oh, that's what's wrong with me.
Yeah, find explanation.
That identity. And so the added thing to that though was well, if you believe that you're this and you really believe you're sex addict and you do what you're supposed to do, then maybe you'll get free if you take on all these other beliefs and identities, maybe you'll get free of your suffering,
There was some
little
hope.
did
The higher power will deliver you.
Yep. So little did I know that was like continuing to just pile on the programming and the beliefs and like intensifying the suffering, so back to Ajit. So listening to Ajit say that thinking is the addiction, the beliefs, doing the Byron Katie work, realizing, oh, the beliefs are why I'm suffering, and putting two and two together, I went, okay, I have to like undo all of this somehow. And I don't know how the hell to do that. Like I need somebody to like show me how to start to dismantle this thing. I didn't even have those words for it. I just remember when I finally got out to the center and talked to Scott, I was like, I remember saying, it feels like my life was like this. And then little by little, it's like this now. It's like this big, and he is the one that said it's because of the belief structures and the programs and the stuff that was sort of foisted on you as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult,
So that's like what the admissible space, what's possible, what's allowed, very small, what's allowed. The freedom, limited freedom, small yard.
And it got about that big. It's like, and so since it had gotten that big for me, it would show up as the binge, what I mean? Especially with the sexual stuff. I push it down, then I would go 10-hour binge on porn like every 2 months or something, and then just feel like crap, afterwards. Not only crap physically, physiologically, but crap like I would turn in on myself and just be like, piece of shit, you failed, what's wrong with you, you'll never get better, and just all this stuff. So and so
okay, so here we are, you meet Scott, and then how long? So tell me more now, so bring us up to speed a little bit.
Sure.
So you met Scott and then you worked with him. I mean, you were a client for some time, and then, so what I know from Scott is that he appreciated I know a lot of things about you, I guess. He appreciated your level of, you're very earnest and very serious, valuing this. And then you were not just playing with these methods, you were like serious, committed, hardcore. And somehow that inspired him. And it's nice that, you know, you are not, as a therapist, it will be very hard to say, okay, well, let's not work together, let's be friends now. It will be hard for me to do that. It's sometimes very tempting, but it's not ethically allowed. So it's nice that Scott had more free container. Yeah. So then how did it go from being, from being a client and you know, this, let's say, hierarchy in some way, to becoming more like peer, and you start to have ideas how to develop this method? Or how did it go? And how did it go with your process at the same time? Which where what did you have to unpack first and this or that to become more free, that I assume you are, from what Scott says?
Yeah. Well, and some days I sort of still feel like a client, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm going, yeah, now you're part of the leadership of KI. And I'm like, you know, like I'm a 6 on the Enneagram. And so I have had the deference to authority, but I also have the deference to being any kind of, to being in a position of authority, you know? So I'm sort of like, okay.
Yeah.
But that's getting better, I think. As I like come into my own power and find my voice more, I feel like I'm, you know, that's getting better. But here's how it went, because it was for me, like being out there as a client, I was even like sort of in awe of Scott. Like he was kind of rock star to me, like, because I listened to Eckhart, Adja, Katie, Scott, a little bit of Jeff Foster, trying to think of anybody else, but those were like the lighthouses for me. Those were the people that were like, yes, like whenever they talked, I was like,
yeah.
that, you know, that like all the other stuff, the religious stuff, the recovery language it would make me like more. But when they talked, I was like, what are you guys doing? What's going on here? You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I got there and I was a little starstruck, even as a client. And then, so I did 90 days. And at the very last day, Scott did a session with me. He said, would you ever consider moving out here to be a facilitator? And at that point, I was like, dude, I'm just climbing out of my initial stuff. I mean, you really think I could do that? You know, he was like, just think about it, you know? So I thought, well, that's really nice of him, but whatever. I go home. Within 3 days, the job ends, the relationship here ends. I'm like moved. I go to stay with my parents in North Carolina for a couple of days. And I'm going, what is happening? You know, so in hindsight, I realized I'd undone enough stuff that it started to flow. The energy and life started to flow again, you know? Yeah. But at the time I'm going, this is crazy. And so he calls me and says, okay, we had just had a position open up. Why don't you come out and be work for us at the center? And I thought, okay, cool. I talked to some of the facilitators that had worked with me there. This guy, Constantine, who's great. I talked to him and he said, it'll be great to have you, and I can work, train you a little bit and work with you. And he said, but don't expect to see Scott very much because he's not around the center that often, Mm-hmm. And I was almost like, oh, okay, cool. Because I get nervous around Scott anyways. Mm-hmm. So I drove out there across the country and from Florida or from North Carolina at that point to California. And I got there and started to sort of train a little bit at the center for what I was going to be doing. And then Scott shows up and he's like, hey, do you want to play music together? Do you want to go to the music store and get some mics and guitars? I'd, been in a band forever and he had played music when he was young. And I was like, yeah, this is like Eckhart Tolle asking me if I want to hang out with him and jam. You know what I mean? I was like, okay.
Yeah. I had this, with Francis Lucille, I used to be a tennis player and he was like, and I knew I brought my racket and he looked at me like, you want to play? I'd be like, yeah, I want to play with you. So there was like, yeah,
please.
I'm getting an in here, Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's what it felt like. I was like, me? Okay, And it was funny because it was a little bit weird at first because I was, like that. And I told him, I just said, I pedestalized. And I was so used to doing that. Like, you know, everybody else up here or down here, you know, and then me in the middle. He was one of the people up here. And so I told him I was nervous, and he said, "Oh, you'll get over that real quick." He said, "Do you want to look around? Do you want to inquire around it?" And immediately just started to dismantle that, like, that projection and stuff. And it was so, I just thought
gold projection, the gold projection put on him, right? They call it like,
yeah, totally. And, you know, nobody had ever done that. I was just like, this is amazing. He's like coming right, he's helping me dismantle this so that we can be like eye to eye here, you know?
Yeah.
So I really,
some teachers have, Francis says this, like, or that it's a responsibility of a teacher. I confuse now what Scott says, Francis says, but to deconstruct this pedestalizing, somehow it's a responsibility of the teacher and of the student at some point, but like it needs to be more like a friend on the path, I guess. Not on all traditions. There's the devotional bhakti where, you know, it's a different approach, but
yeah.
So it seemed like he liked you, he wanted to be friends with you, and he saw your I guess valor, your fearlessness to face your shit. And then what?
And then, yes, it was like the earnestness and the readiness, which for me, I thought, well, he kept saying, "You have such great readiness." I'm like, well, that's not a virtue. I was like, thank you. But I'm like, I will do anything to get out of it. It's like desperation, or like, you know, it's like, so then we started to get in the hot tub every night. Then he asked me to move in. That was the next thing. He was like, "Do you want to move into our," Chad, his husband at the time, and "Do you want to move into our guest room?" You know,
housemate.
Be a housemate. And I was like, "Yep." You know, like, yes, I do. I would like to do that. So yeah, that started the hot tub nights or whatever, where we would go out like 6 or 7 o'clock every night and spend about 1.5 to 2 hours in the hot tub. And at first it was just him like working with me around, let me get you clear of this stuff so you're more effective with clients at the center. Right. And so that's how it started, and that was helpful. And then it, like, I think he realized, like, here's what it looks like to me looking back at it, because at the time I didn't know what was going on, but I think I had a hard time just doing the resting as awareness and looking at the thoughts, because I was so
identified with the content.
It was like right here, I was so identified that I couldn't even get any space from it, you know, like I was so hooked in. And in hindsight, it's like I'm going, well, I was addicted to the suffering of it. I was addicted to the chaos of it, to the, you know, I couldn't trust myself. That was a huge thing too. I couldn't trust myself because there'd been so much stuff, programs like foisted upon me, you know. And so that's how we started to develop KI, because it was like more, to me, it's more sort of practical. Not practical, it's more versus LI, which was like sort of like more non-dual and conceptual, and like, are you this, are you that? I was like, I don't even know. And so we boiled it down, simplified it even more, and we started to talk about, okay, like we started developing reverse inquiry. Utility inquiry came later and stuff, but it had to be really simple and really wild.
It had to be really simple and what? It broke up for a moment.
Yeah, it had to be real simple and real basic, like dealing with a child, sort of. Because I felt like I was sort of learning to walk again or something at that point, you know.
Yeah.
Get back in touch with myself. So yeah, that started the development. And I don't think we realized for a whole year that we were developing anything. I think we were just doing inquiry. Like, he would just do it with me, and then occasionally he would have something. I remember he started to ask me, "Will you facilitate me?" And I was like, okay, you know, and I would do it a little bit. I got okay with it. He would kind of guide me through it, you know. And so And then after about a year, somebody said, you guys are developing a new modality. And we were both like, we're just doing this in the hot tub. It's just because we thought it's sort of similar to KI. It's just like basic, or LI, let's just say basic LI. It's just really like simplified.
I see.
And then and then somebody at the center, a couple of the facilitators going, this is new. This is a newer approach. This is, so.
Yeah, it's interesting because LI is more like closer to this Ramana Maharishi question and more like looking into, I guess it's to applied neti, the LI.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm not this content, I am the perceiver. And are you sure you are this thought? Yeah, so it's applied neti for modern days, but the KI is now facing the ego, basically. It's deconstructing the ego.
Yeah.
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 And it's interesting you guys didn't know, but I was really surprised. Like you guys came fresh with this reverse inquiry. But I studied this, they were called something else. In Hakomi, they were used reverse inquiry, they called it something else, and they were using it very little, just sporadically for some things. You know, so when I got to reverse inquiry, I was like, oh, yeah, this is just like that. It's just this guy is using it all the time. That's weird. Oh, that's good. That's good. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting how different people, I mean, they don't know of each other, but the same, I guess, from the divine creativity, this needs to come up.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know. You read the different teachers. I'm like, it seems like they're saying the same thing in these different ways, but I totally can, tie it to, yeah, man, it's the digging in, I think too. I think the reason we had to start digging, first of all, with me, we had to start digging in and like really challenging the ego beliefs because I was so entrenched and I was like clinging on to this 12-step structure for my life, basically. You know, like I don't know if he's told you this story, but with the porn addiction, he would say, why don't you just go use porn or go be sexual? And this is how the new model sort of started here, where he's like, and then see what happens. And I was like, what are you talking about? I can't do that. You know what I mean? That'll be. And he'd say, why? And I'd say, well, because this thought, and this thought. And he'd go, look at those.
Yeah.
He'd be like, watch that. And I go, oh, those are thoughts. Like, so he started sort of like slowly like weaning me off of that 12-step abstinence,
So I guess the beginnings of this new model of recovery were being discovered, the principles, as you guys working on your material. And so that's interesting, this to I guess he realized that your very attempt, which is now, I guess, part of the new model of recovery, the preoccupation inquiry and the aversion inquiry, like exploring and bringing to the surface the part of us that says, oh, this is bad for me, I shouldn't be doing this, that's immoral, or I'm weak, or this is not good for me, I gotta stop. So this part of us that usually we tend to identify as me and as trustworthy and being on my side, somehow you guys saw that was kept the compulsion going, huh?
Yeah. Yes. That the abstaining and I shouldn't, and I have to do this so I can be okay, or I have to not do this so I can be okay. Like those beliefs were driving the craving for the compulsions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was like, and the reason, for me, the reason I had never seen that before was because I'd never been in an environment where it was okay to do what I want, to be myself. Like this is my first time where he was said, yeah, just go use porn, go be sexual, go do what you want to do. And I was like, but what about, I remember at first I was like, well, aren't you gonna like say what I shouldn't do? Aren't you gonna give me, like almost like wanted the rules, where I was like, aren't you gonna beat me up about this or judge me? Yeah.
It's interesting. Once I was recently dealing with some compulsion and working with Scott, and at some point I was like, Scott, you are a spiritual teacher. he wrote books. Can you just tell me not to do this? Tell me not to do this, and because I just need to stop this, and it's not. And he was like, no, I can't do this, but I think this is great what's happening, because you can inquire actually. It's interesting. Yeah.
It's almost like too much freedom. Like, it's like, I can't
Yeah.
right now. And what's interesting is I'd read a book a couple of years prior, Summerhill School, big into Anthony DeMello, and he talked about Summerhill School, the book in his book. And I read Summerhill, and it's beautiful. And it's this concept where these kids would come, like, that were real damaged or, like, emotionally traumatized or whatever by their parents and by authorities from other schools and stuff. And they would come to Summerhill, the school in England, in the 40s and 50s. It's still there, but and they didn't have any curriculum. Really, it would be like, yeah, you guys can come to class if you want. You can stay and just kind of do whatever you want to do, And the kids, they had the same reaction at first, where they were like, some of them would do things on purpose to get punished. You know what I mean? Like, because they're so used to, they're so almost like, they're conditioned to it. And they said some of the worst kids, like within 6 months of just having that space of freedom, and that's just external freedom. They're not doing inquiry or anything, but having that freedom would start to heal and then start to find what they did want to do. And they would start going to the class that they wanted,
Yeah.
And I thought, that's beautiful, man. I mean, where do you find that,
Yeah. It sounds like almost like it's a secret of like right education somehow. Because the normal education, it seems to not value our enthusiasm or what we are really into. And then instead of that, there's a program to not make mistakes, to be perfect, and to follow these recipes of happiness from our parents. And so the enthusiasm is squelched.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like a culture of repression, or a culture of self-betrayal that it teaches, And I thought, and the funny thing was, coming into the thing with Scott and starting to do new model, when he would say, what do you want? At first, I would parrot and go, I want to be sober from pornography. And I really thought that that's what I wanted. Yeah. And then I found out that's a fucking program. You know what I mean? Like, they told me that that's what I should want. Like, shouldn't I want this? You know what I mean? Like, shouldn't this be,
Wow. Yeah, it's I remember that not long time ago, I think I was watching some of your meetings, your meeting with Scott and on a new model of recovery. And there was this thing that like, hey, what do I want in connection to weed or with some smoking of this? And what do I want?
Yeah.
So that was shocking. Like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's so simple question. And somehow by connecting to what we want, connect to some real power rather than, oh, what my my superego things that I want. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That gives me chills when you said that, actually. That's like exactly been my experience with it, where it's like, yeah, you're letting it be my idea. You're letting me decide if you're going, okay, what do you want? Let's do what you want. What do you want? Giving me that. And in doing so too, it's like, I can start to come out from hiding. I can start to kind of come out from my hole that I got buried into,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, yeah, so what I understand from Scott and from you a little bit, what you are telling me, that you started to peel off this, the 12-step program that was oppressive, contributing to deficiency story, and you started to, I guess, encourage your authenticity, inner freedom, stuff like that. And probably you process deep stuff with your mom and dad and family of origin. And
I did, yeah. And this is great too. And this was an unexpected benefit or perk or whatever, was that I started to do the work, and I was out there for about a year and a half, and went back to visit my parents and talked to them. And then they told me, they were like, what are you doing? Because you're back online, like you're like yourself for the first time since you were like 3 or 4, you know, like we can like feel you.
Wow.
And so they came. So my parents, both of them came to the center and spent, I think, 90 days each out there doing the work.
Wow.
I was one of the facilitators, you know, which was like such a breaking the.
You were facilitating your parents.
I was one of the people. There was 2 other facilitators that were working with them too, but I was one of them, and it was. We had to talk about that. Scott and I and Julian had to talk about that. It was like, is this okay? And because Jules and I were kind of erring on the side of like, I don't know, and Scott was like, do it.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, man, let's not have any rules. But you know, it's beautiful because I saw. I don't know if you've ever worked with your parents or heard some of their story, or I don't know, but I saw there's the intergenerational stuff, because all the stories, so many of the stories that he and she were carrying, like I went, oh, that's where that comes from, and that's where that comes from. And
Yeah.
you know, I know how to work with it. So yeah.
Yeah.
And now, and oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, now my mom is a facilitator. She's certified, and my dad is doing deeper work. Like he's digging into his stuff more because he's had a lot of trauma. So
yeah, I was saying that I have seen this I work, let's say, with someone, and then their mother came to me, and I work with their mother, or I work with the mother, and then the daughter came to me. So that was like very useful for me. Very like, I see. And as far as my parents, at some point on my path, I got a lot from going to these men's circles, Mankind Project, men's work, shadow work. So I did that for a long time, and at some point before my father died, I didn't know he was going to die, but I invited him. I told him, hey, Dad, come to this training. Come here for a month and come to this training with me. The woods, it's men's work. And my dad was like, okay. No questions asked. It was very sweet. And I brought him there, and I sat with him in some circles, which made me highly uncomfortable. I was very uncomfortable with my dad. And then so he was going through the training, and I was part of the facilitators, but they were a big container. That made me very uncomfortable and angry, because he was showing up as he was very loving and very wonderful. He was very wonderful, and everybody was telling me, "Oh my God, your dad is so sweet. He's so wonderful." At that time, I haven't, I had unprocessed stuff, and it just pissed me off. But what was a little sad is that at some point they had some strong, they call it guts, like strong experiential group process after a few days of little processing, and they asked me to leave the room. The idea was that, hey, if you don't want to be a container limitation for my dad, so he can be free to do his work. So I had to leave the room, but it wasn't necessary because he didn't have work with me, but then I got permission later. Some people told me that he brought his dad and talked, and anyway, but I was close to this, to witness my parents' inner work, but it was special that you had this. Yeah.
And so,
go ahead.
Similar feelings with both of them at times too, where it was like it would be beautiful, and then they would do something else, or they would start to show up in a different way, or people would say, oh, your parents are, and I'd be like, yeah, if you only knew, like
right. Yeah.
So and I tapped into my stuff.
Understood that thing there, that actually deep down I wanted to connect to my dad as a man. It's a man to man. I really wanted to connect with him as a man to man, and I realized that if I want to do that, I can't be in the wounded child. So happily, I think I had a little bit of time later to do that.
That's been my recent. I've been looking recently because there's this dynamic with. I think I'm the same thing, frankly. I mean, I would listen to you say that, and I'm like, yeah, because it's like I've diminished myself. I had diminished myself for 2 reasons. With him, I diminished myself to sort of be safe and let him do his thing and just be like, But then with her, it was like, she was angry at him. So for her, I went like, okay, I'm gonna be the opposite of that. I'm just gonna completely like
Mm.
push down my masculinity and my repress the sexuality and do that stuff. And so yeah, that's been what I've been working on, climbing onto that stuff and trying to let that expression and masculinity and power like come forth. And it's challenging, man. It's like yeah, I've had a hard time with it.
Mhm. Yeah. So with this kind of freedom approach and not focusing the new model of recovery of the no need to focus on stopping the behavior unless the behavior is extremely harmful. So it's more like better to process what drives that addictive behavior. So using this model and also being open to this pointer, like, hey, what do I really want in connection to this? It helped me see that, yeah, so I have there's some substances or activities that there's still compulsion in me. But then it made me think of, like, you know, I have some things like, let's say, alcohol or sugar and some other stuff, even like this porn, that I'm naturally not addicted. I'm free. I'm free. So I can watch. I don't need to watch. I can have chocolate, but it's okay. I can let it go. I can have some wine, but not too much. I can let it go. So I could see like, oh wow, I know this freedom to use, freedom not to use, not even using, like to enjoy. So, and in some other areas I don't, that I can see how I must have it, I must smoke it, I need it, whatever. So I don't know, it helped me to, that's what I want, if possible. That's what I want. So I'm curious if you could, through all this processing of the drivers,
Mhm.
you got to the point to the sex or even sexual tapes or whatever, it's not sticky.
With the pornography, what happened with that was that as it started to sort of fall, as I was allowed and looked at the drivers around it, and as it started to kind of die down, it would spike sometimes and there'd be a binge, and then the aftermath would not be as big of a deal because it used to be that was almost the worst part. Like I would do a binge and then I would just for days just like
Yeah.
hate, shame, all
Mhm.
this stuff. And Scott used to go, well, what's the aftermath? What's happening? But so the aftermath started to chill out. And then as the aftermath chilled out, I started to realize I don't even know if I like this that much. Like I was like, and also since the deficiency story started to diminish, the deficiency story for me that drove the porn use was, well, of course it was, I'm not good enough, like I'm inadequate, right? And compared to these actors, I'm like nothing compared to them, you know. But the other thing was, it was like these two people are choosing each other over me. Like I'm unwanted. I'm
Wow.
over here, you know, and they're doing their thing, and I'm unwanted. So as unwanted and not good enough as I started to sort of like thin that out, the sufferiness of the pornography, the charge and the shame and the sufferingness kind of started to like diminish too. So then it just became,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm just watching these two people. And I remember thinking there was a period where I started going, this is sort of weird to watch two other people. Like this is sort of strange. I mean, it's fine, but it's a little strange. And then I got bored with
Yeah.
it, you know? And as soon as I got into a relationship with my fiance now, and noticed I want like emotional connection with, as normal sexuality started to come
Yeah.
back online, then it was just like, you know, like I totally prefer that. Like this is so much more like
Yeah.
fulfilling and stuff than that is, you know. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
Fully sexual but emotionally connected, a real person that chooses you was much more fulfilling than seeing those people there. Yeah.
yeah. But here's the interesting thing is the mechanism of the thing that still comes up sometimes that I'm working with is the thing about this person's choosing them over me. And I've tied that back to parents where it's like he chose her over me, she chose him over me. But that comes up, and there's sort of, it's like the addiction that I see that underlies what the point was this addiction to suffering in that way, like suffering, going, oh, I'm
Like
unwanted.
or left out of something, huh? You're left out, excluded, or rejected.
Yep. And it's because I'm not good enough, right? And so there's that sort of like double-edged deficiency where it's like I'm unwanted, and it's because I'm not good enough. So it's that still comes up from time to time, but it's the more I do, the more it's standing out. And the emotional work, the repression work, I mean, that stuff. I was talking to Scott last week, and I said, Scott, I think that the repressed emotion is like the glue that holds these deficiency stories together. That these pockets of just repressed shame and rage or whatever it is the thing that, so going into that work has been really, really powerful too. It's hard, but it's
okay. So let's stay on this topic. It's full of stuff here. I mean, Scott was here last weekend or 2 weekends ago, and we had the 1 day on addiction.
And
actually, I had some people there that I knew that they are struggling with like porn and special fantasies of shameful fantasies they wouldn't share. So I was kind of bringing up for them. But this idea that the type of porn that one is watching. So for people who are, let's say, struggling with this type of addiction, it's more taboo, more shameful. I worked for 2 years with sex offenders on parole. Anyway, so so the idea is that it's important to at some point when we get over the stigma and shame, to kind of look at the type of porn or sexual fantasy we like, and there's something meaningful about that. My type of trauma or wounding or deficiency identity is mirrored in the type of porn or sexual fantasy we may like. So I could hear with you that, basically the porn you're watching a mirror that I'm deficient as a man somehow, and I'm excluded, I'm not good enough. And so I guess as you saw through that is not true in you, then there was this somatic no, I guess what we call it, that the body is like, dude, I don't like this. I have this with tobacco. I'm like, I even do inquiry in the moment. Like, I'm like, I love this. No.
It's so strange in the moment. I know what you mean.
I just love this. No. Anyway, so that's interesting to face that. Also, things like, I don't know if you can share some more of this or what you have seen to give more examples. So in your case, the type of porn you're watching reflected I'm not man enough, or I'm excluded and not good enough and rejected and bad. Other people, I know some people are watching aggressive sex, while themselves they are very mellow, and let's say the presentation is that they are very shy and insecure, but they are watching aggressive sex. Then later they feel like bad, that, man, there's something wrong with you. I'm a pervert. And or women being submissive, or themselves being like that. And I remember with Scott too, he had this sexual compulsion towards BDSM connected to something. Can you share some more on that, or cross-dressing or things like that, for people who, just generally speaking, for people who have some more tools around that?
Yes, I mean, that's so. With Scott, he had the BDSM stuff, and that was, for him, ended up being tied to the deficiency story. And he could say more about that, I think, but it's like his was, as that diminished the chart, it was like similar for me. I was talking about my experience. Still trying to talk about this, but mine was, it was I mean, I for a period of time was like questioning my sexuality because I had this story going so long of I'm not enough, I'm like nothing or I'm not enough and I'm unwanted. But the not enough thing started to drive me to watch that, and the porn became more and more about focusing on these guys, the guys that were like huge, what I mean? Like just that's what guys in porn, they hire people that are huge,
Yeah.
like that. And so, but I got really focused on that, and I would be like, what is going on? I need to explore my sexuality. Am I homosexual? Am I turning homosexual, or have I been and I don't know, like what's going on? And I talked to Scott about that, and we did some work, and it ended up being that was, there may have been, there may be a little bit of that, like drawn to like bisexual or whatever, but I'm pretty much on the straight side, but it was like a deficiency that kept me going so focused and fixated on they're big and I'm nothing, you know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
And
So some kind of it's some compulsive torture. It was
it
a
is
torture that was
absolutely
really exciting, interesting.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the shame of it was the aphrodisiac. The shame was like I would go, oh, I'm nothing. And that oh, I'm nothing would be combined with this huge sexual rush. And so that got like linked together,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this was just the process of like pulling that back apart and going, okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would, for a while, I mean, it lasted where it would be like, I need another hit of the suffering,
Yeah.
It's been over a year, I think, since I've really looked at any porn, but the last probably year, I would have every couple of months or something, I would have like a small binge. And it was interesting because in that small binge, it was just about the suffering part of it. I was going more for, like, I would start doing well and I'd be like, I need to suffer again. I need to be,
Yeah.
I need that shame feeling. I need that hit of like feeling like, oh, and so that's why when we developed the new model, I thought this is new model of recovery from suffering, because I see it with other people, like with food addiction or even under drugs and alcohol addiction, that there's this mechanism that, and it's like Audrey was saying, addicted to the thinking, aka addicted to the suffering, addicted to
Yeah.
that story, that suffering, So but yeah, with the people that are drawn to, I've worked with a couple of guys that are drawn to that aggressive stuff too, and with them, I'm always like, okay, let's look into that, and also let's get you angry. Let's find your rage. Let's find your aggression. So because it's like it may be partially that's like
Yes.
shadow hugging in a weird way. You know what I mean? That you're seeing this rage and this aggression being expressed, and that you're like, I gotta somehow be able to do that.
Yeah. That's interesting because this person I have in mind, it's also like, yeah, it's kind of really nice. And I think underneath there's some anger and it's not allowing himself to go like this, the place out there. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the repression work, man, that's been so powerful for folks like that. Cause then I can start to tap into the stuff that was never allowed for me. Rage, anger, off the table. I mean, pretty much everything was off the table, but definitely rage and anger were like not allowed, So if I can find this container and work with a facilitator in which I can like express the rage consciously, responsibly, and inquire into it, and then it starts to like chill out, and I've seen that with these guys where it's like they stop being as drawn to that kind of porn or, so.
If they can, somehow they express that repressed primal energy in themselves in some way that is healthy, in some way, therapeutical or some sport or something. Yeah, to channel, to allow that energy. In men's work, they were talking about this inner archetypal. It's more like men's work has a little bit of Jungian psychology in it, and these archetypal energies,
Yes.
like it's a bit like parts work that within us we have there's the inner child, there's the golden child, the wounded child, there's the strategic child, then there is the lover, the lover and the magician and the warrior and the king and all of these. And these are all necessary energies, archetypal energies that ideally we have access to, and we can be fluid in them. That was the idea. Like, sometimes I have to get shit done, focus, warrior, no bullshit, discipline. And sometimes I can share deeply and break down and cry and share vulnerably. And some other time I can go deep into self-inquiry, and this I can do within an hour. But they were saying that for most people, some are, I guess, offline because of repression or various things. They don't talk about repression there, but anyway, so they had this thing called the wild man. They said that as men and women too, we have the wild man, Iron John. Robert Bly was talking about it, that it's like big and ferocious and primal, and then the village, they are scared of him, so they throw him in a cage, but the women and the men, they secretly look at him, they're like, oh man, it's so powerful, so hot, so we secretly long for it, but we are scared of it. And so all that anger, rage, and the idea was that if power, creativity, fire, the idea is that people are afraid of the seeming destructive power of it, but when it's put in a cage, then it comes out sideways. If it's ritually or esoterically activated and integrated, then there's the fire of the drive of the mission of purpose or enthusiasm, I don't know why I got into this, but because it's it in the bones, in the blood, in the balls, in the DNA as man. Even now it's 2020, we have this, and it's if it's not tapped consciously, then it gets rotten somehow. And we burn the village, they're calling it. Like,
Iron John burns the village down.
Right. Anyway.
God, that's so what it is. And then that so aligns with this, what we're talking about, because it's like, letting someone like Scott going, go ahead, like express your sexuality, go ahead and do it, just opening the gates for that, because I'd never. And so then it's at first, of course, strange, but that's what I've been doing with a couple people that have eating disorders too, working with them, and it's similar stuff. It's like the energy, all of the life energy, or the power, or whatever, has been so just locks down, and so and it's habitually so that, and so then it's just comes out in this one place where it's like binge on food, or like whatever it is. And so then it's like once they start to express in these other ways, it doesn't come out as strong, and then it starts to kind of open up, and then it can, like what you're saying, I mean, that's exactly like what that's beautiful. I remember one of the right before I met my fiance, who I'd had a crush on in high school, by the way, and so I reached out. I was kind of like, I'm going to tell her, I'm going to like reach out to her and tell her, and then that started us talking again after years and years. But right about that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing what I want. I'm going to drive to Colorado from California, just do a weekend where I just drive like 14 hours in a day and just do this. I'm going to go to LA and see this show that I've wanted to see. I'm going to just do all this stuff. And on that trip, it was interesting, because it was almost like I'd done enough work to where the power and the energy could start to express itself again. And on that trip I just found myself starting to post stuff on Instagram. I'd never said anything about any of the work ever that I was doing in public. And I was just like, here we go, boom, write it, post it. Stuff was just like flowing out. I asked her, I didn't even ask her. I just said, hey, I just want to let you know how to crush, like I would express that. And then that, and so that's, I feel like what happened for me is it's like the channel started to become wider, and it was like, okay, life is moving again, life's flowing here, whereas before it was just so
so the life is not damned. It's interesting. Damned like a dam, or damned, I don't know.
Both.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So I don't know if it's true or if you want to talk about this, but it's pretty revolutionary. So Scott was, I guess, giving you permission to, hey, you can watch, it's okay, I'm not going to judge you. But also, I think as later he was offering you some optional exercises like, hey, I think you should, this thing that you want to do that you don't let yourself do it, I think you should do it, go and do it. So things like that. That's very Zen, like a Zen master kind of little tests, little tasks. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, it was great. It was scary, but it was. Somebody said on the members area yesterday, they were commenting on there, said this feels very scary and exciting and freeing at the same time. And I was like, that combination is so the best. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
Yeah.
oh God, but here we go. You know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I see. Interesting, because this inspires me a little bit. Because although in the modern life or last years, people see me, they're like, man, this guy is so free, he does all this stuff. And
Yeah.
but in my childhood, there was this feeling that I can't, I have to be in a certain way. I think it's one of my deficiency stories is I have to actually, I have to something, be something, not something, or so. And I think a lot of reaction towards that in my life, a little reaction against it, and some of it fell away, some of it was disconstructed. But I think that might be useful to really tap down in some places where I don't allow myself to be fully real. In some areas, damned by something, some morality, some religion, some residual of something Judeo-Christian, yeah, to do that while being responsible and as a psychological experiment.
It's exactly. I mean, I've said that before. I said this is such an experiment. It's just playing with these. And it's like, yeah, me too. I mean, there's still these little pockets where I'm like, I have to do this. I have to be this way. I have to not do this. I have to, and it's like, I don't know, with the reverse inquiry and the utility inquiry, it's so powerful to look at that stuff because it's like, I always end up going, who says? You know what I mean? Like like who wrote these rules? And it's me that's saying it's my conditioning, which of course started out there, but now it's me saying, you can't. But and being and I guess being gentle with myself at the same time, because I think I really went for like I have to go from one end of the spectrum to the other, and I have to totally like do everything that I want and screw everybody else, and and I went all the way over like where it was like almost like punk rock, like fuck you, I'm gonna do all this stuff, and then coming back to the center where it's like, okay, wait, because then even over here I'm putting rules on myself, like I can't betray myself, I'll never do that again, all that stuff, and it goes, well, that's a rule too, you're making up that rule. So what if you didn't have that either? What if it was like I don't have to betray myself, reverse inquiry one side of it, and it's okay if I do sometimes. And like looking at both and going, wow, that's even better. That's just sort of like, that's literally like I can do whatever I want, like I can just be, so
yeah, it's interesting. Piggyback on what you said before, I had the thought, I lost it. I was resonating the beginning of my path with this fourth way tradition. It was popular in Europe, Gurdjieff, Uspensky,
Gurdjieff,
awareness-based work, and then he was saying this thing, which is interesting, that there are two types of suffering. There is real suffering, which is unavoidable, which is more like what Buddha talks about, the old age, sickness and death and loss, and like shit's happening. It's real suffering, and which is actually necessary. Gurdjieff was saying it's necessary for the process of awakening. If you are too comfortable and all of this, it's necessary, part of life, set up here in the video game. But then there is a bigger part of suffering, which is unnecessary suffering, which is imaginary suffering, which is self-created suffering.
Yeah.
And I remember I was reading this as a 18-year-old. I was like, yeah, man, yeah. Right. But I didn't have no idea what just and so Gurdjieff was saying that the most difficult thing for men is to sacrifice his imaginary, unnecessary, self-created suffering. You know, which is all of this deficiency story. I cannot be myself. I shouldn't. I can't. I have to. It's interesting. And yeah, and it was saying that the real suffering usually stays for a little time and then can end, but the unnecessary suffering is all the time. You know, we are milking it. It's like we are juicing it. Yeah, I can see how this KI is diminishing the self-created unnecessary suffering.
Yeah. It's because that God, that wheel keeps spinning. It's just like this, just these habits. It's like it just keeps doing it, and it does. There was a guy that was at the center when I was there, and this is right about when utility inquiry was, when we started to like come up with that idea to play with it. But there was a guy there that was a Enneagram 4, so he was very like, like 4s, like it's very tragic. Like my suffering, they're very identified with their suffering story, and it's like, and I mean, I have a lot of that too. I'm a 6, but I have a lot of that too. So, but this was a special case where this guy was just, and there wasn't a lot of like, he wasn't making a lot of progress. He was getting frustrated. Like, what is this? And he was getting frustrated with. And then Scott and I started playing with utility, and I was like, let's go with him and look at utility for suffering itself, for all the various ways that he does. So let's find the ways and then go, okay, I don't need to suffer like that. I don't need to suffer this way. And we came up, I did that with him in a day. We just had a session for an hour and a half, and he came up literally with like 18 different utilities.
Wow.
Why he needed to suffer, and it was just like, and then I did it with myself, and I was like, I have like 13 or 14 myself. Wow. I don't even see that's just operating down there below the level of consciousness. And it was like, he saw that and he started to go, holy shit, like, what am I doing? And I did the same thing where I was just going, I don't even know this is operating, and so that became the like, if I'm suffering, it's like, go look at that. Like, there's part of it. It's like, why? What's it doing? How's it serving? What's the, So
I remember this. Scott was saying that you came up with this utility inquiry. You came to him one day and said, "Hey, there's some utility to our suffering," and he was like, "What? Tell me more about it." Yeah. So for people who are watching, and many of the people who are watching this, they're already doing some type of work, and we are using in the work this question. Okay, so this painful thought or this painful pattern is happening, or this painful relational pattern is happening. So we ask the question, what is the seeming utility of maintaining this subconsciously, or what's the seeming payoff, or what's the seeming advantage, or what do I get out of this? And not to stop too early, because the mind can say, no, this is fucked up. I'm getting nothing out of this. To not stop there. There be something there. So, this idea that Hawkins also, before I met you guys, I was encountering in David Hawkins. But I couldn't make it practical so much. He was saying that before you can let go of any negative emotion or anything, let go to process it, you need to find out the juice you are getting by believing that. There's some ego juice. He was calling the ego juice, and even he was saying this thing, and right. So it inspired me, because it inspires me now. I have something in my life that I often say, oh man, this is torturous, man. This is torturous. So need to look into, okay, I don't need to torture myself about this, and what are the utilities of this? And I guess when we do this utility, is not just cognitive, right? It's not just, so kind of what's the utility of this, and something will come up. It will say, oh, I get to punish myself. But don't stay there. Like, allow feelings, sensation, thoughts, memories, kind of allow that what comes up to milk it more and see what's next, right?
Totally. Yep. Yep. And it's asking the body, it's asking brain number two
Yeah,
what it knows about the suffering source. So I'll be like, for instance, like I don't need to let's say my unwanted story shows up sometimes, right? And I'll say, okay, I don't need to believe that I'm unwanted. I don't need to believe that. I
yeah,
get triggered in a situation and I'll go, okay, I don't need to believe I'm unwanted. And the body literally will go, yeah, you do. You
yeah,
know, it'll like contract and go, yeah, you do. And then I'll go, what? What? For what? So for what purpose, you know, and wait for it. And then either images or words show up. And like you said, sometimes I'll have to follow the trail, you know.
yeah,
Well, if I believe I'm unwanted, then I'll suffer and it'll be awful. And so, okay. And so then, so that what? Well, if I suffer enough and believe I'm unwanted, then maybe someone will notice. And so then the
yeah,
utility becomes, I need to believe I'm unwanted to be wanted.
yeah, yeah,
Or, and so many times that's come up in sessions where people are, it's like, I need to believe I'm unlovable to get love. I need to believe I'm unsafe to be safe. I need to, and I'm going,
yeah,
just seeing that is going, that's insane. I mean, that's insane, but I didn't know. And it's still going on down here. So I have to just keep bringing it up into awareness, you know?
yeah.
So,
And I guess you are, yeah, I guess we are all on the same page here with the platform, I suppose, but also for people watching this. So finding out the belief, you know, something, the belief or the story, I believe that I have to hide, or I believe I have to be in a certain way.
yeah.
This is painful and torturous. And so I find out the belief, okay, I have to be in a certain way. I see it as an object, as a voices or words or something. And then what do I get out of believing this to avoid people being upset with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so for safety. And then so the next step, what I got from this modality that you guys developed and now is unfolding, growing, you know, like a child.
Yeah.
That now this is
Daily.
splitting the baby, right? So on the left side of the consciousness, putting, okay, I have to be in a certain way. On the right side, I believe this in order to avoid people being upset and be safe. And just seeing that without flinching, seeing that back and forth, uh, without judging, without blending, without just seeing that. It's like, you know, Gurdjieff had this thing like, hey, observe yourself. When you observe yourself, there are some traps there. Could be judgment, disgust, horrified about what we observe. And he was saying, observe your patterns as if you are watching an interesting, curious stranger. You know, interesting, curious stranger. My also Francis was saying to watch with loving indifference or benevolent indifference, you know. So that's kind of like that. Just watching, you know, as if you are like a scientist. And it seems like in the watching they are unhooking or something, and some other things come up, like, oh wow, I don't need to do this, man. This
Yep. It's that splitting the baby. Yeah. That's been, which is a newer development. That's been really powerful. It's like, it's almost like seeing the utility of the utility or something. It's like very,
yeah,
it unhooks some kind of chain. And when I do it, I always see, oh, first of all, these are two separate thoughts. And then, whoa, these are just thoughts. And then the body goes,
yeah,
you know, and it's like, okay, whoa. And there's something else I wanted to say. You said something that totally sparked something for me. Oh,
stranger or
when you were saying I have to be a certain way, you know, like that. And that's one of my commands too. It's like I have to betray myself to survive. Basically, I have to betray myself and be a certain way and act or pretend or whatever. Um, and allowing that, like with repression work, like letting that be the command, like sitting with that as a command, like be a certain way, like almost like taking myself to task. Like, so I'll say, I don't have to be anyway for anybody. The body goes, yeah, you do. And then it gives me this command, be a, you know, change yourself, betray yourself, be a certain way, wherever it is. and just letting that thing fire,
Mm-hmm.
be a certain way, be a certain way, be a certain way, be a certain way, watch, and then start to watch from awareness and just see it. Like you said, loving detached, just watching this thing roll, firing it back up again, maybe be a certain way, be a certain way, be a certain way, and letting it play out. And I'm starting to realize it's like, well, those are the fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses in the body. That's, you know, like that would be like hide would be like a flight response, you know what I mean, or a freeze response or something. But just letting those things like have their full life, like allowing them to just kind of like go until they start to peter out, you know.
Yeah, I guess for people who are watching this, so don't try this at home. I mean, if you are somehow skilled a little bit, but we are talking about this rapid fire inquiry. Like, let's say if I have, because I have this, I have to hide. In order to bring this up more to the light of awareness, I can reverse it continuously. Like, I don't need to hide. I can be fully myself all the time with everybody. I can be absolutely honest with everybody all the time. There's no problem. And then witness, it's like churns the, no, I have to hide. So, and just being the witness of this tape, and the energy, and I guess if it's hidden, we need to bring it to be seen. If it's hidden, we can't see it. I guess, it has power over us.
Yeah, and it doesn't want to be seen usually too. I don't know if you've encountered this with people you're working with, but I'll start talking about repression of a certain emotion, and they'll be like, I did this at first a little bit too, but I'll be like, yeah, so repressed anger, and they'll be like, yeah, I don't really repress anger, and then I'll go, okay, so try this. I can express my anger fully to my wife or whatever, and they're like, oh no, and it's like, well, there it is. You know what I mean? It's there. It's in the body. It's just unconscious and doesn't want to be messed with, And so, it's letting that thing, just letting it play, because I think I spend so much of my time either trying to not pay attention to it or make it go away or whatever, but instead just like letting the resistance and repression play itself out has been really powerful,
So if I can switch subjects here, I still see you are putting things from Madhyashanti and things like that. So how did the non-dual research, and especially, what am I, and this self inquiry or self-abiding, and so how did it go in that department? Because now we talk so much more and more about like processing patterns, wounds, and content. How are you with the Buddha nature and awakening, and you are that, and that is not limited?
Yes, I think for me it was like that stuff started to dawn more as it was like, I know Scott had his opening, and he like had the recognition of awareness and non-dual awareness and all that, and then brought inquiry into it. I think for me, it was like I was already doing step work and like sort of therapeutic work, and I was, and so that's where I come from. And the more I did that and we developed the inquiries, the more it started to open up to that piece. Because before it was like, that sounds great, but I don't even know my mind, and I know the mind can't understand awareness. But it's like, but I was just like, what does that mean? And then the more I did the work, more at the end of a session or something, I would go, okay, just rest without belief, rest here without thought, and I'd be like, oh, this is that. This is that, because he would always say, come into rest as awareness before we start. And I'm like I said, I couldn't do it at first because I was so identified. But the more that I cleared and deprogrammed, the more that I think has shown up experientially for me. And but I still err on the side of inquire, rest, inquire, enjoy life. Like I'm really working on rest and enjoy life. Like do that too, like
rest, meaning like just like resting as awareness, or just coming back to being. knowingly being the being that we are.
Yes.
So not just KI and processing. So having a balance with processing and with, I guess in my language, would be like self-abiding or self-remembering, and but also living fully, enjoying enthusiasm of life.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. God, it's key. And it's what I never allowed myself because of those unconscious sort of martyrdom programs that I had going. It was like, I remember one time somebody in Al-Anon when I was in there was like, yeah, somebody's talking about being happy or becoming more happy. And somebody in the meeting said, was like, happy, do you mean less miserable? You know, is that what you mean by happy? Less miserable, a little bit less miserable. You know? It's like, that was me, where it was like, there's had to be in the suffering and in the misery. And then the more that that gets sort of dismantled and stuff, the more it's like, okay, I can take it easy. I can like rest, literally rest, and also like rest as who I am and just be and just enjoy. And, you know. But yeah, it's almost like Scott and I think we came at it from,
Yeah.
you know, he came more from that world and I was coming more from the, I guess the really therapeutic and 12 step, you know.
So now you feel, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Did you notice that by processing this bodily somatic stuff, the mind gets clear, and now it's more effortlessly clear, not like I need technique or mindfulness to clear my mind. It's more like the mind is naturally less active when it's not needed.
Yeah, little by little, it does. It's sort of like trajectory. It's sort of like little by little, it starts to like quiet. And then again, like with the point, it would spike and there'd be a big trigger or something. And then
Yeah.
Okay. And then, you know, so it's
Yeah.
sort of seeps in. You know?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Francis Lucille speaks like that. At the beginning, the mind is like a vicious dog that bites everyone and doesn't obey the master. The master being presence, and then as the presence wakes up to itself, then the dog starts to know the master, and the dog waits outside the door of the master, and when and then just sits there. And then when the master goes out to do some stuff is needed, not needs the dog, then the dog comes. So that's interesting. Like it becomes like a companion, like a tool, like useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm using it. It's not using me. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, and by the way, I went to, when I was living at Palm Desert and working at the center, I went to see Francis like a couple, 2 or 3 times at his
Yeah.
house. It's so beautiful up there. That was great. Yeah.
Did you meet Laura too? Laura Lucille?
No, I never got to meet her. I saw her, but I didn't get to
Yeah,
meet her.
she's also a teacher, and yeah, she got into this since she was like a teenager, and she had all these kind of teachers. She's more like a little bit like you in a way, that Francis is the public, and Laura that doesn't want to be like so in the front light and stuff. Yeah. Oh. Well, I want to share with you something that you may I shared with Scott when he was here. Actually, I don't know if you heard of this Sedona release method.
Yeah.
And I think the successor of the creator of the Sedona release technique. That's interesting. I forgot his name now. I mean, I'm looking at his photo, but Lester, yeah, Lester Levinson. So Lester Levinson,
yeah. Yep.
and he was the first teacher of Laura, and then Laura studied with other non-dual teachers. And anyway, Lester died, and this gentleman continued. Forgot his name, and he recently interviewed Scott. But anyway, part of this Sedona technique, there's a similarity with this somatic processing from awareness, and with some KI, there's a little similarity with that. But even before I met Scott, I was attending Laura satsangs, and she was one of the few non-dual teachers who were stirring shit. She wasn't just pointing to awareness. She will point to awareness, help people kind of rest, and then she will intentionally stir material, like, you know, welcome, wanting to get approval, wanting to get love, welcome anything that bothered you last week and bring up any memory of this that bothered you. And then she will guide the little process around that. But anyway, my point here was that there was this exercise called AMD, advantages and disadvantages. And the idea was to pull up some item, which could be a pattern or a belief, and look at it from awareness, and then do this back and forth. What is one seeming advantage or utility of this? It's just the utility inquiry. What's the seeming advantage of that? Bring it up and let it tell its story, and then also let it rest. And then go to what is one disadvantage or cost, or what am I losing through maintaining this belief?
Yeah.
Then waiting something comes up, and again allowing that to, okay, now I'm staying small and I'm attracting shitty partners all the time. Okay, well, welcome any feelings and memories and sensations about what you just said.
Yeah.
Letting that settle. Go back to utility. What's another utility? Do the same thing. What's another disadvantage? Do the same thing. And this back and forth, the A and D and A and D, A and D, somatic from awareness, that opens the file. And so anyway, I got to you guys. I was surprised once again, like, okay, different people, different things, different ages, come up with something very similar.
Yeah, that sounds just like, and that sounds like it's utility with the sort of splitting the screen, going back and forth, you know, that's,
Yeah, it was a little bit like, I don't keep the utility, so just utility fully. Then the screen comes down, also noticing the background. The part of the technique was that, okay, fully face the content, feel the content, but then rest as the background, if possible.
If possible, yeah.
And then what's another disadvantage? That something comes, feels the screen again, allowing it to rest with the content, and then going to another one. So I'm using this, it's actually part of weaving tools. I sometimes do this A and D, but if something juicy comes in the D, then I can go into maybe reversing that and this or that.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd actually like to see if you have a write-up or you have an example of it. Like, I'd love to see that, because I don't tell Scott or anyone, but and I'm just gonna tell everyone, but I weave in stuff all the time with like all different types of things. Like it's evolving. I still do Byron Katie sometimes, like during, and I'll pull in, like, you know, there's a thing in Sedona method that a guy at the center, actually one of the guys that was working at the center when I was a client, taught me, with the releasing.
Yeah.
And it's just similar to that, where it's like, it's similar kind of the utility, where it's like, what's the payoff here? What's the, you know, and so.
Yeah, this releasing is nothing else but that I'm not resisting the shit, and the thing is coming up, and I'm allowing it without focusing into it. It's like, you know, the discharging of the screen. You know, it's the same thing we are doing here in KI. Yeah, I don't have like a flow chart, but I have I can send you a guided. I have a guided process where you can put your own item. So I send it to clients. Whatever you have, put it there. And when I was working with Laura, it was interesting. She doesn't like to hear my story. She doesn't. She's still very strong non-dual. So if it's too much story, no, she's not going to take it. So sometimes, but this method was working even like, okay, what do you want to work on? Well, you know, I have the same shit. This is like a headache with women. She was like, okay, tell me no more. Headache, great. Let's pull the headache up. What is one utility of this headache? What is this? So it was interesting without even knowing the particular story issue, you know?
She just, the bullet points.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I'd like to see it if you've got it.
Yeah. Yeah, because bringing the what's the disadvantage, or let's say cost inquiry, that will bring stuff too. And it's, yeah, brings more stuff up. I'm curious what's, for me, most juicy now, what's happening with the work. I guess connected to repression and the vulnerability inquiry. Somehow I realized that in spite of the fact that I was teaching, welcoming feelings and not resisting feelings and sensations, I still do resist. And I still do like, and so I noticed this development in the KI work recently of this emotional boomerang. I don't know if it's even a term like that, but let's say pull something up that usually stresses me out or evokes a reaction, pull this person out, and not even go to what deficiency story is evoked in me, although it's good to do that, but what feeling is evoked in me, what sensation feeling is evoked in me as I see this person. This one, okay, I feel this. I want to feel this fully. So going straight for the emotional content, stirring emotional content and doing this, I guess I recently talked to Scott to maybe call them resistance inquiry. Like, I want to feel this fully. I don't need to get rid of this. Yeah, for me, that's a very shortcut and direct. And I still find it, it seems like a shortcut and it's hard, but that's the way to go.
That's right. That's right there. Yeah. That's that stuff. Like, I want to feel this fully. I think if when I first started working with Scott and got out there and we were developing the work, if I would have done stuff like that, and I'll say the next one in a second. There's two things I think would have like saved a lot of time, frankly. But one of them would have been that, like, I want to, like, assuming that there's resistance with pretty much every energy and emotion in the body, there's built-in resistance there, and just going, okay, I want to feel this, and then watch for the and then allow that, stay with that. If he would have done that with me, I think right away it would have. Ooh. And the other one is, I can trust, for me at least, with my background, which I think I could pretty safely say I had and have what clinicians would call complex PTSD, where it's like, I can't trust my reality. I basically have to deny my reality to survive. I have to like pretend and like not see what's happening and all that stuff. I can trust the reverse where I can trust myself completely. I can trust my experience. I can trust my perceptions. That and I want to feel this fully. Mm-hmm. Like you said, they're just like the hot knives. It's just like, it just goes right there, So I've really, and I'm doing that with clients. I'm doing that with new clients, by the way, both of those, and it cuts right in. It's like you don't even have to explain that much to people, give them that much context. It's just like, let's just try these,
Yeah.
And they get it.
There was a gentleman who I used to work with, and then he had more advanced and dangerous addiction, and he came recently to the center and did intensive work there, and he came back to me. So it was really nice to see how now his chops are much stronger in doing self-process work and all of that. Yeah. But then I was like, okay, dude, so what are we doing now? What should we work on? It was like, it took us some time to see. It's almost like I wanted to talk to who worked with him to see what's next now. But then it came up this, basically, it seems like the most useful would be this resistance to feeling. I want to feel my feelings. No.
Yeah.
That is like bread and butter. Generally, I want to feel my feeling generally and individually for each one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see that more with men? Do you see that, or is it across the board? Is it with women too, where it's like a lot of like, or is that like, is that
I think that it's across the board resistance to feeling,
Yeah.
And across the board. But I can see that some women, especially some women who have done some type of inner work, they are more comfortable and they have more experience allowing feeling. The issue there is that sometimes there can be too much into feeling and not seeing the mental program in it. So sometimes, and when I worked with Scott at some point, I was like, at some point, some grief came, a lot of grief, and like, I was emoting, and he was like, hey, that's good, but make sure you watch this thought that says love died. Yeah, it's okay, you're crying, but can you watch this? So yeah, that's the danger. Sometimes it's like a lot of emoting. We are emoting, which is good to emote because it was in there for a long time. But I'm emoting because I believe in this thing, which might not be true.
Yeah, I know what you mean. He'll go, make sure you see that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, how did I miss
Yeah.
that one? So yeah, beautiful.
Well, I can see that we are coming close to our time limit. Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and it's interesting. Like a different person, it's a different dynamic, and I enjoyed it.
Me too. Likewise, totally. That's
Yeah.
fun. We should do it again. And
Yeah.
I want to at some point be able to come out when Scott does another weekend and do it with. So maybe the three of us could do it together. So
Yeah. Actually, I was talking to him. I'm used to doing from Mankind Project work and prison work, some type of group processing, which is less sitting and slow. It's more like a visceral standing up, more cathartic, exorcistic like. And I was sharing with Scott about it. He was like, yeah, I want to do this. So I'm thinking to bring one of my partners from there, because this kind of work you do like in a team of 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And you collaborate. And so, yeah, that would be wonderful.
That sounds great. Yeah, I saw the prison work that you do. Is it like the movie The Work? I've
Yeah,
seen.
the movie The Work, actually, I used to go there in that room, but I was a few years later. I used to go there and with those people. Yeah, which is some kind of Mankind Project technology, which although they say, hey, it's not therapy, it's a bunch of therapies mixed in together. And they took it in prison, so they made it like a prison. Yeah, they took the fluff out and they make it prison ready processing. So yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Let's talk about it. It'd be cool.
All right, Dan. Thank you. And maybe we'll have another one. We'll go deeper about other stuff.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, man.
Ciao, ciao.